Before I start today's episode, I just want to remind you that word of mouth is the biggest driver in a growing podcast. I have had the privilege of having this podcast reach people in 262 cities and 28 countries during season 1. But I know that there are still many more listeners that I can reach with your help. If you enjoy this podcast, please tell 2 of your friends to subscribe, and if necessary, explain to them how subscription works. When you subscribe to the podcast, you automatically have new episodes populate in your library, which makes sure you don't miss an episode. I would also like to take a second to say how much I have appreciated receiving your emails and your Facebook messages about the fact that you are enjoying the show. It makes the long hours in front of the computer easier, knowing that people will be enjoying what I produce. Feel free to drop me a line with any accolades or suggestions. Feedback is always wonderful. Okay, and here we go with the final episode of Season 1.
You're listening to 515, the Ultraman podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, co-race director of Ultraman Canada, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, MJ. In today's episode, I sit down with co-race director Brad Sawa and the voice of Ultraman, the man with the stats, the announcer to the cows in the middle of nowhere, Mr. Steve King, to discuss the field competing in Ultraman Canada 2021. So today on 515, what we're going to do is we're just going to sit back and have a little chat about the upcoming race happening July 23rd, 24th, and 25th in Penticton. And we will be discussing the various athletes who are coming and just hopefully giving you a little more information about them before you start following them at the race this year. So today I'm joined with my co-race director, Brad Sawa again, who you met in the last episode. I hope everybody enjoyed that episode. And from the very first episode, we are also having Steve King join us, actually from the first 3 episodes. So if you haven't joined us in the beginning of the podcast, you can go back to episodes 1 through 3 and learn a whole lot about Steve King, the voice of Ultraman. So welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the podcast again.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, basically, we'll just try and go through each of the athletes since we were using the smaller field this year. We weren't able to get all our international athletes in. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about each one of the athletes that are coming and our special relay team that will be joining us this year, the return of the relay. And maybe, hopefully, Steve will give us a little bit of background into what was happening in the other years when we had some relays. So first up, let's talk about JD Tremblay. JD is an athlete out of London, Ontario. He's 35 years old, and he's coming to Ultraman as a rookie. Steve, do you know a little bit about JD that you can share for the listener?
Well, I don't think I've ever called him in at the end of a race. So for me, it will be someone new in the field, someone new at the distance as well. And what's neat is to see we've only got, I think, 3 people in the field that have gone the distance before, except in the relay division. And so it's delightful to see that we're hopefully going to have some more people joining the Ultraman family. I got the impression, though, from JD that he's probably not expecting much in terms of overall position. He wants to get out there, he wants to experience it, and he wants to finish it. And obviously, that is the goal for everybody because it's a fantastic feat to be able to say over the 3 days you have managed to accomplish this. And I think from what he is saying that this would be the ultimate for him in terms of what he's achieved so far. So, going from half irons to irons and then for some people straight up to an Ultraman distance, that's a very big deal. And some people are not familiar with the area as well. And as you know, around the country, we've been having a heat wave, and I would suspect it's going to be a toughie from that perspective alone, let alone the seriousness of the course. So my guess is he's done his research. You guys have put a lot of information out there. There's a lot of previous people who have been over the course as well that they can glean info from. So I hope for his sake that it's going to be the best of days. 3 days.
JD has been putting a lot of months into getting here. So we're really excited to finally get him to Penticton and see him at the start line. And yeah, definitely it's going to be fun seeing him go through the 3 days.
Yeah, and JD's actually been emailing a little bit too, and like a lot of people, he's feeling behind in his training, especially in the swimming. He hasn't had the opportunity to get into the pool due to the COVID closures and things like that. And he's also told us that he's recently got a foot injury as well. So I'm sure he'll be well cared for on the course. He has Heather Myers coming out to crew for him, who is doing this as a volunteer because she has signed up to do the race in 2023. And she wanted to come out and preview this, and she'll be bringing her husband along as well, and he'll be crewing for her in that year. So that'll be a good opportunity for them to come out and see what's going on the course. So that should be an interesting team to follow. We'll see how it goes for JD.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize, some people may be thinking, well, look, there's only 8 people taking part in terms of getting into the start of the swim, including one relay. But we have before in 95 and 99, we had 5 finishers 1 year and 7 finishers another year. So it's more about still embracing the challenge and becoming part of the family and getting to know your crew, because many of them aren't necessarily people who knew each other before the start of this event. So hopefully there's going to be a lot of friendships formed as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I mean, that is one of the best parts of the whole event. Let's move on to our next racer. This is Eric Dufour. He's from Coquitlam, which is my home city. And when he signed up, I went and had a chat with him at a local park and just wanted to get a feel for what he was looking to do with the Ultraman. And I got the impression from him that he's more the kind of person that will just set a goal and then just grind it out. It doesn't necessarily matter that he's been around and has this long history with the sport. He's definitely done a lot more of the 70.3 stuff, but he would just pick that new goal and then just grind and get there. That was the impression I got when I met him. He's definitely another one who's going to be a little bit hampered because he also informed us that he currently has a stress fracture in his foot. So a couple of people are going to be starting on the limp on the starting line this year.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, when you say grind it out, I mean, it's hard to think of someone grinding it out when they've done a 4:44, 45 half iron and a 11:22 for an Ironman distance. However, if you're going into a double marathon and you've already got a major problem, a foot problem, that could create issues. But if he can run, and walk quite fast, he could still, you can still go for a sort of a 10-hour time there, but you never know what can happen between now and that start date.
Yeah. Have we had competitors in the past, Steve, that that have had to go through the run with a major injury?
Oh, we have. And I also think back to when Naphin attempted to be one of 2 people trying to do the double back to back. Because he managed to finish that first one, but he suffered really badly on the run and just missed out by a few miles, unfortunately, of doing back-to-backs. But there have been a number of people who consciously were aware that either their running wasn't too solid or they had put out so much effort over the previous 2 days that it was going to be a major endurance fest for that third and final day. And so pacing is a big one. Usually when you see someone coming through the half marathon mark at 2 hours, 30 minutes, even though you'd say, well, that could be a 10-hour pace, but it gets a little worrisome when you're at 2:45 to 3 hours because they're given that 12-hour mark. And we know the couple of sections, a couple of half marathon sections that are much tougher because of the climbs involved in them.
Yeah, and it's not an easy course. It's not all paved. Probably 3/4 of it is a gravel surface. I don't know about Eric, but for myself, I didn't have a lot of experience running, on that type of surface. So that was a bit challenging for me my first time. And I didn't start with stress fractures. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely, and I also didn't pace wisely. So definitely pacing will be key to make it, within the 12 hours.
Yeah, and that's one of the good reasons, of course, to have crew, and then especially to have some pacers that are working with you. It hopefully keeps your mind off the pain and the anguish and the miles still to go to get to that finish line.
Yeah, and I think that also will play a factor for our next athlete as well, Jon Greyell from West Vancouver. It looks like he's going to be a very strong biker and is an excellent swimmer. But it looks like perhaps the running course might be the part that, after 2 days of competition, might be something that will be a challenge for him as well. And I'm hoping he's trained really well for this. But just looking at the stats from previous races, it looks like that might be the part that's a key component for his race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just as we were talking about Eric there, they've done around the same sort of time, around 4:45 for a half iron. And Jon has done around the hour mark for an Ironman, did Canada, in fact, when it was at Whistler. And so the swimming, I see him possibly being in third or fourth place around that time, because I would potentially think Barry Berg and Chad Bentley are going to be the guys potentially at the front of the field. But they're going to have competition. I could see the battle between those three out of the swim. And potentially Jon could be the man leading at the end of day one if he has the sort of bike speed that he's shown at Ironman, because he did like a 4:58 there, and that is a tough course. However, when you add up those times and you see that at the back end, he was around, I think, the 6 hour mark for the marathon. So that was a tough grind for him. But if he can pace himself sensibly, he's got to leave something for that final day as well. It's one thing to have 1 or 2 great days, but you still got to get inside the 12 hours regardless on that third and final day.
Yeah, and at that Whistler race, he was only one of 5 people to break that 5 hour mark. So that's pretty great.
Yeah, it's looking at these numbers here. This is going to be it's a small field, but it's going to be a competitive group. It's going to be exciting to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe we should just pick up a little bit on that small field thing again. I don't know that I necessarily talked about that enough in the intro. We did go ahead with the race this year, knowing that we would be doing only Canadians when the borders were not going to be opened in time for the international athletes. And at the time that we made the decision, we did have 9 people registered from Canada that were fully registered and on our list for this year. And we had 6 people who had contacted us saying that they would like to be in the race if they can get into the race, because they're also Canadian and wouldn't have to travel. And so we had these 6 people on what we called the wait list until we knew if the internationals were coming. And they had all contacted us after February. So we felt pretty confident that they were knowing what they were getting in for, that they were trained well enough that they would be able to come to the start line. Unfortunately, once the idea of showing up at Ultraman became a reality, none of our waitlisted people were wanting to take that on at this time this year. So we thought we had 6 more on the wait list. We thought we had 9 in our regular list of people, and we were going to have 15 people at the race, and we thought this was going to be a good number still to run with just Canadians. It obviously hasn't turned out that way for us this year. We're going to have the 7 solo competitors and the 1 relay race, but it really does for us allow us to get the race running again for those competitors that have been training for 2 or 3 years now, to like someone like we're going to be talking about later on, like Barry, who's really just had this world championship goal all this time. And we didn't feel like it would be fair to the people who were signed up and were training and ready to go if we were to pull the plug because we didn't have enough people. So a lot of what we do is not necessarily about the race as well. So, a lot of it is about those people meeting the 12-hour time limit and defeating the elements and getting all the way through the number of kilometers that we have in this race. So hopefully, even though we have a smaller field, Stephen, maybe you can talk to this a little bit more. When you've had fields that are smaller, it will still have the same feeling for the people that do show up.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. It's not about the numbers. It's about the quality of the event and the quality of the people involved in the event. And as organizers, you guys have to do almost just as much work to make it all happen. Um, and you come away still with that great sense of satisfaction because often people are going to be out there once a swim is completed. That day one, most of them are going to be by themselves, just them and their crew. Then not many occasions where they're going to see other athletes. Of course, at the start of each day, it's like that. And then on day two, you've got the out and back section, the Asoya section, of course, and a couple of out and backs later on. But other than that, some people may be way at the back or by themselves. So again, it takes a lot more in the headspace and the crew to get that person to the line. But when you think about it, for the average person, this is a battle with the self. And it doesn't have to be a battle. It's really complementing the self and challenging yourself to a personal ambition. However, there are going to be the guys at the front where even the transition on day one can make a difference. I mean, we've seen, we had a race quite a few years ago. Scott Beasley beat out a gentleman by about 18 seconds. After that gentleman, Curtis Flock, was well ahead going into day number 3. And poor Curtis, his feet were really mashed up. And he managed to get to the line, but realized, unfortunately for him, that Scott Beasley had pulled back all that time and just taken 18 seconds out of him. In the World Championships, there was an athlete who stopped to kiss his wife just before the finish line. He lost the world title by 5 seconds. I mean, so for those guys, you know, even the transition counts on day number 1. But for others, it really is about, can I continue to put one foot in front of the other, or one pedal stroke or one arm stroke in front of, after the other, and get there. And there's so much satisfaction. Brad and I have both done an Ultraman distance race, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. Honestly, I've still got my bike sitting behind me here from 1994. So, you know, there's lots of memories, and that's what this is about. It's helping create those memories for people.
Yeah, and I think with the smaller field, it creates the opportunity for even closer bonds amongst the athletes and crews and everybody that is there. So, there's pros and cons to, having a huge field for and having a small field. And we're definitely going to take advantage of, that to get to know everybody there that much better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of the racers are bringing their families with them. I know that Jon is one of those people. He's going to have his wife, Lisa, and his 13-year-old son, Adam, in the crew vehicle along. And a couple of the other people are doing the same. And so for them, it's just going to be a truly family bonding experience as well. And I think, Brad, probably you can speak to this as to what it means for you and your family and how they were a little bit younger at the time, the kids, when you raced originally, but they've grown up around this. So you can maybe just talk a little bit about how that envelops the whole family.
Sure. At my first Ultraman that I participated at was in 2012, and my youngest son was still being carried by my wife in her belly. She was 8 months pregnant, and it's actually funny because we were talking about our challenging run course, and it's very hilly, and I always tried to make the appearance that I was running, even though I was only moving at a walking pace. I still tried to, look that way. And there was times when my wife, because she was out in course a lot, even though she was 8 months pregnant, there was times when she was able to, get out beside me, and, I would say run, but it was walking. She'd walk with me for a couple hundred meters, and although it was really nice having my wife there. When you're trying to run and you got 20 kilometers to go, and you're trying to stay mentally focused, having your 8-month pregnant wife run beside you in flip-flops, and you're going as hard as you can, it's not great for your spirits. So I think I did at a certain point just say, you know what, just cheer me on as I go by, but please don't run beside me. But seriously, from a family point of view, both me and my family really enjoy the smaller size of a race like this, and the fact that we get a lot of interaction out there. It's really easy for my wife to follow me and find me on course. It's yeah, it's just very friendly for that. And yeah, my kids have definitely grown up around it, as have some of the other competitors, and even beyond that. At this event, I know that you have some people close to you coming to the event this year. I've got my cousin and his wife and their daughter coming out to help volunteer at this event. My in-laws are both in town for the event from Manitoba to help out. Yeah, it really is a family event. Everybody wants to be involved in this.
Yeah, and that's why we just keep expanding the Ohana as we go.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take a quick break here so that we can talk about one of our Ohana members. Steve, take it away.
And now, here's another Steve King story.
The next athlete I'm going to introduce you to became the most senior athlete to complete an Ultraman in 2005 at the age of 60. He was 12th overall then at 33:44:24. Now, since then, we've had an athlete at 65, Mr. Gerald Streefkirk, who completed in 2015. Now, at 65 years of age, this gentleman went to the Big Island, 2009, completed there in 33:51:21, became the most senior person to have completed on the Big Island. Now, since then, Dave Wilson has achieved a similar performance in 2011 at 65. And of course, the year prior to that, the Big Island's very own Wendy Myer also became the most senior female ever to complete at 65 years of age. Now, for those of you interested, the most senior athlete to have completed an Ultraman to this point is now Dan Jensen in 2017 at Ultraman, Florida. He finished and he was 67 years of age. Phenomenal stuff. So we're still awaiting that first 70-plus athlete to complete. Dan did come back to try that a couple of years ago. Was not successful, but I think we'll see him back at a start line, and hopefully we'll see this gentleman. We did see him also in 2009, not only on the Big Island, but he raced at Ultraman Canada. He lives nearby, but he did the relay team event along with Brian Schroeder. And this gentleman did the swim and the run. In 2008, the year prior, he'd been named the Interior Runner of the Year and BC's Age Group Runner of the Year. He's had many marathon wins in his age group and half marathons. 2012, he was racing on the Big Island and through the islands in Hawaii. He did the Miracle Mile, in fact, with a top 20 finish there in 5:53. He was third overall at the Kona Triathlon Club's 20K at 89:15. His run with the Caballero Blanco and the Tarahumaras as well. Some of you know that story, just amazing stuff. And he was kind enough to bring me back some of the sandals that they actually race in. Now, he is a national level squash player. He was a ski instructor. He's a retired jet pilot. He still supports all sorts of races locally and formed a running club, in fact, in the town in which he now lives, which is Oliver in British Columbia. His wife, Susan, a very accomplished athlete, along with her twin sister, Sandra, crewed for him, in fact, at Ultraman, Hawaii. He has crewed there himself on many occasions with people like Phil Makin, for people like Gary Wang. And he's also been the swim captain at Ultraman Canada. So the man I'm introducing you to, none other than Mr. Ellis Andrews.
Okay, well, let's move on to our next athlete. The next athlete I spoke to in episode 6 as one of the people to look out for and to see at the race. And that is Marla Zook. She's from Whistler. She's 48. She's actually been doing quite well in the Ironman world. She's been to Kona 4 times. She tells a great story about how she got there the first time in episode 6. People should tune in and listen to that one. Steve, what do you know about her stats and where you think she's going to be competing here? Unfortunately for her, she's the only female this year, but I feel like she's going to be competing with the men anyway, so it's not going to make a big difference.
I would agree with you. I think she could be right up there amongst the top guys. Absolutely. She has done a 10:38 at the iron distance, which is not too shabby at all, to put it mildly. As you mentioned, she's done about a dozen Ironman races, 4 times to the World Championships. She's done a couple of ultras as well, including up there in Whistler. They have a 50K up there, and I've commentated on that when she's raced. Now, yeah, it's one thing to say, well, she's the only female, except obviously in the relay as well, but you've still got to finish if you want to be the women's champion. And we have to remember it took 3 years of Ultraman before we saw a finisher in the women's division, and that was a 3-time world champion, Tracy Preston. So one way or another, we are looking at Canadian winners at Ultraman Canada in both the men's and the women's divisions. However, you've still got to get to that finish line one way, shape or form. And I think she has got the form to actually be right up there. It's very consistent in the swim. Regularly does an Ironman 118 to 120, usually around the 5:35, 5:40 mark for the bike split, and often around 3.5 to 3:40 on the marathon. So she could be someone who could really take this apart as well and surprise a lot of people. We have to remember, it wasn't too long ago we saw a female take the win here in Penticton and became a world champion as well. And so things can happen. We've seen Lady Dede Greisbauer in Florida when we were hoping we could see a new world best in breaking 24:07, which was the world best at that point. And then she ended up not only breaking 24, but busting right through 23 hours as well. So she was a pro triathlete, and we haven't got any pros here, but we've got all Canadians, and we've got 3 provinces represented and 1 female. So there'll be a lot of us rooting for her in every which way.
Yeah. And I think that the longer the distances go in endurance sports, the more the playing field is leveled between gender. Yep. And I think that we saw that in RAM with the first overall female winner just last week. Canadian from Vernon as well.
Just happened in Adelaide on the weekend. There was an Adelaide 24-hour run, and a lady blew the field away, literally did an amazing job. Did something like 145 miles or something. It was quite remarkable. So fantastic, 230 odd K.
Impressive.
Yeah, and I know she's one of the people that has been training in the heat down here, because we've had that heat wave down here. Mm-hmm. So she'll be one of the people that's prepared to hopefully take on those high temperatures that we're going to be having in Penticton over the race weekend as well.
Yeah, after putting in some big days in the 40-degree plus heat, this 35-degree weather just feels comfortable now.
Yeah.
Which is odd.
Yeah.
Well, I know, Steve, you actually, you were talking about these other races that were just happening, but you've actually had a chance to get back out and do some announcing at races. Where have you been recently?
Well, that was in Edmonton or Stony Plain, actually, for what they call the Great White North Half Ironman. And Tom Bamford, the race director, did a fabulous job under very difficult conditions because it was on, it was off, that sort of stuff, until they said, yeah, it's a go. But then in the final few days before the event, he was told that the coliform count was just too high for the swim. So all of a sudden he's got to plan a duathlon, and he already had a try, a sprint, an Olympic distance, an aqua bike, and a duathlon, as well as the half. So what we ended up doing, we set everyone off at 5-second intervals. But in the end, people thoroughly enjoyed it because it was under racing conditions, and they were back in the saddle, back on the road, and a meeting again with many of their peers and co-competitors that they hadn't seen for a long time. So it felt good just to get back into race form for a lot of people, because as you've said, people have been training, not necessarily with anything out there. Some people have been doing virtual races, and they turned out to be quite successful. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't necessarily host a virtual Ultraman. I can't quite see that happening sometime soon. But it was excellent to be there. And again, kudos to the race directors. There are many of them, and you guys are two of them as well, and you know what it takes. So I really applaud them and their team for getting out there and doing it under difficult conditions, and the athletes for showing up, and the sponsors for showing up, which was impressive as well.
And did we have any big names out there or Ohana members out there that we would recognize?
No, you didn't. But you did have Martin Caron out of Penticton. He was registered for the aquabike. He felt he needed to work on his swimming and biking. And he was the fastest biker of the day, but they just did the bike. But he did a tremendous job on that.
Excellent. Yeah, I know because one of the things we were also looking at in bringing in the relay team for this year's event is people were very concerned about where their fitness levels were. And that's ultimately why the people turned down the application or turned down the invitation to come and race this year, is because they felt that either they weren't able to swim or they weren't able to, do whatever training that they thought they would need to do to come to a big event like this and do what they felt would be something they could go home and feel proud of. And so one of the things that we talked about, me and Brad, was, well, maybe we can put out a relay team event where then people who have different levels of training can still get together and come experience a little bit of our Ohana. And surprisingly, when we put it out on Facebook, that tons of people were like, I'd love to do the swim. I'd love to do the swim. I'd love to do the swim. And we thought that was the one thing that people were not going to be prepared for, with pools being closed and things like that. So in the end, right now, we only have the one team, but there's a lot of experience on this team. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about this team and then a little bit of the history of the relay event at Ultraman.
Yeah, actually, at Ultraman Worlds, they rarely got more than 3 teams. It only occurred a few times, but there was an exciting time when a Canadian team actually bested the Americans. And it was friendly, but it was really neat to be able to claim when we got home from that the Canadians had just won the World Ultraman Triathlon title. So they lived off that for a long time, and it was wonderful to be there to witness that. But when it comes to the team we have here, I'm impressed. I'm stunned you are able to get a team together, or people willing to put it together at such short notice. I'm assuming you put them in the order in which they're going to compete. Is that correct? Like, is Lucy going to be doing the swim?
I believe Lucy wants to do the first day bike as well. She's definitely doing the swim.
Yeah, I wondered whether they were splitting up according to discipline or the day. So good for her. Well, there's someone who certainly knows this area very, very well. We've been with her when she actually ran a long way as well from Kona on the KVR. We've seen her do Badwater, the 135 miler, 216 kilometers. We've seen her do Brazil as well. And she's one tough nut. And I am so pleased that she's in action, because I know she also helps in the background with a number of events over the years. So we're delighted to see that she's going to be joining us. And that's going to make it interesting as well, because the other crew has to crew for the individual on the day as well. So they've got to save something for their own stage as they go. And obviously, Lucy hopefully will be in great condition by day 3, but she might suffer a bit on that second day when there's a lot of running around trying to make sure the cyclist gets their bottles, et cetera, et cetera. And Scott McDermott, I was pleased to see that he's coming, because it's a fair distance. I saw on the other night that he was looking for a place still in Penticton for he and his family, Hillary and Caden. And I certainly hope he found a place, because I know it's getting expensive here. So that's something else we have to watch out for. He may end up camping at your place, Brad. This is what we've done for many years. When people can't find a place, we've all got basements and that, and you hope you can help them out, because that's a gentleman who has actually got a documentary featuring him and what happened to him as a member of the Warrior Code. He's a coach as well, had a gym for many years, and he is a race director in his own right previously, and has done some race announcing. So he certainly knows the in and outs of the sport, and I'm sure his family will be happy to see him take part in this as a relay team member. And what's nice is the threesome is made up not only of 2 athletes who have achieved Ultraman family status before, but a gentleman who's helped his wife win on 2 occasions, once in the UK and once here in Canada, and that's Kevin Wilson. And being a local, he certainly knows what it's all about, and he knows that run course, and hopefully he's going to bring them to the line, and hopefully everyone completes inside that 12 hours and safely, because it could be a hot one out there on all 3 days.
I was surprised as well at when we announced the relay. I thought for sure it would be the swim that would be the hardest to fill. And in the end, it did turn out that the run was, I mean, we could have probably had 6 relay teams if we had more runners. What was the challenge for us? So many people were willing to swim and bike. I never would have predicted that. And this definitely is going to be a fun team to watch. And I'm definitely impressed with all 3 competitors. I know that Lucy has been out in the area training the last few days, and I think getting used to the heat out here. And Scott, the last time I saw Scott was actually in Penticton when they opened up on-site registration for the return of Ironman Canada. And I believe Scott and a friend had driven out from Sylvan Lake that day. I would imagine that's around 9 hours maybe. And they registered on site. And if I'm not mistaken, they drove back immediately after. So that's a committed athlete right there that, he wants to race. He's hungry for it. So unfortunately, that race didn't happen. I would imagine Scott's rolled over for next year. I know that he's planning right now to go to World Championships in November. I think that's the plan for him. And with Kevin, I've never met Kevin before, even though I'm now living in Penticton as well. But I'm super impressed that there's a Penticton local that could throw their name in the hat for a double marathon on a couple of weeks' notice. I think that's super cool.
Well, let's hope the kids come out this time as well, because it's taken a while, obviously, for them to get back into their running and other sports, which they're both so very good, because they became parents a few years ago and had to take care of the kids. So it's a toughie. And the other person now, Shane Mascarin, I was really pleased to see him come on board. I believe it was only in the last few weeks when you opened things up and said if anyone else is still interested. And I know the man from Wainwright, Alberta, was a keener once he heard, because he's been doing virtual runs to raise funds for different things like mental illness and stuff like that. He is a great supporter of people who have suffered in that way. And he even did 100 milers virtually. He's done like 15 of them. We've seen him at Ironman. He is a sub 11 hour competitor on a regular basis too. And hopefully his wife, Sarah, and maybe some of the kids are going to come and join us, but I'm sure Sarah will. And I think he also has a local person who's going to paddle for him.
Shane has done the Ultraman distance before, has he not?
Yes, he has. Yeah, indeed. He's done like 28 hours. So he knows what the course is about and wants to come back and challenge that time. Because, you can get personal bests if you break it down the 3 disciplines or the 3 days or the combined 1 and 2 or combined 1, 2, 3, which is obviously what the ultimate aim is, to see if you can either because some people have come back to the sport many years later. Kurt Madden, the original winner, he came back 30 years later and still finished 7th at the World Championships after winning it in 1983 and again in 1985. I mean, it's amazing what some people are able to do.
That was impressive. I was fortunate to be there, and he was amazing to watch.
Yeah.
And so Chad Bentley, who is a competitor this year, and Chad lives part-time in Penticton, and I've known him and his family for years. In fact, we competed against each other in 2016 in Penticton, and on that day, we spent the whole day 2 pretty much inside of each other on the bike. It was an extremely windy day, and I think we were just both in the same pace and same rhythm. And every time I turned around, I could see him a couple hundred meters off in the distance, or went around a corner. And when I got to the out and back in Princeton, I made my turnaround, and 30 seconds later, there he is. And sure enough, when I got to the finish line at the arena, he was not far behind me. So on day two, it was exciting getting to the finish line, and me and Chad had a fun competition on the go. And I did have a few minutes up for him on the run, and Steve created some great excitement for me at the finish line in seeing would I steal one position from Chad at the finish line. And it was a bit of a nail biter for me, and added some excitement to the finish. And I'm just going to leave it there. Anybody that wants to find out how that story finished can Google search it or talk to us at the race.
Boy, you've still got time to enter and renew that competition, Brad. I just put that out there. Well, I would also say that, with Chad, one of the wonderful things is he challenged himself twice in 2016 by doing this and then going to the World Championships. And as you know, also did the Epic 5, which is a stunning event with 5 Ironmen, 5 islands, Hawaiian Islands, and 5 different days. So logistics is tough, but for the athlete, especially if you get to talk to Chad about his story, Rad Chad, as the family call him, of course, they're going to be out there en masse as they support his ventures. Again, it'll be interesting to see how he does on that day one, because he's a great swimmer. He's done around 240 before as well. And I think he's out to possibly set a personal best, because he too knows the course very well. It's going to be his 5th time at an Ultraman distance race.
Yeah. Chad and his family, they also do a lot, outside the sport for fundraising and charities. And I know that's something that's very important to MJ and Chad. And, they're always giving back. So a family that is very, very big into ultra and very big into charity, and just amazing people.
And a big part of this podcast as well, because Mary Jo does do the announcing at the opening and closing of this podcast.
Is that MJ's voice?
That's MJ, yes.
Wow, she sounds great.
and
I thought you had an assistant in your studio with you doing that live.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, Chad was also in episode 1, where he told some of those stories about the Epic 5 and the challenges and the Ultraman races and some of the fundraising he's done. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Chad Bentley, you can always go back to episode 1 and listen to that again. And we might have a little something special for him at awards night as well, other than just a finisher's trophy.
Extra special evening for him.
Yeah.
So our final competitor, I believe, is Barry Berg from Vancouver. And Barry is on the Wadi Inc. Elite Hit Squad, I believe. And something that's really impressed me about Barry is that he seems to swim year-round outdoors, and living in Vancouver. That's not easy to do. It's, I should mention open water swim. He's going out in the Pacific Ocean and in lakes, and, he must have a really thick wetsuit and, a cap and booties. But so Barry has been, I would imagine, training right now for 20 months because he was, training for last year's event, which didn't happen. And I do know that it's his ambition to get to the Ultraman World Championships in Kona. And I think that Barry has a very good chance at doing very well at the race this year. I think it's fair to say that he's one of the favorites for the overall if things go according to plan for him. And he'll definitely be a contender if he makes it to Kona. And I'm sure he'll be at the front of the pack, giving those guys a run for their money.
Yeah, he's in that 50 to 59 division. And we have to remember there has been a guy, Miro Kregar of Slovenia, who won the world title when he was in his 50s. So it is possible. And he's done a time, Barry has done that time of 23:44. And that was his one previous outing over this distance. And he came second to Jon Bell. And they really made a race of it, those two guys. So it's thrilling stuff. And as you said, he's an awesome swimmer. He's done a 2:25 here, which is only 6 minutes off of Jordan Bryden's record for the course. And we know what an incredible swimmer Jordan is as well. And I think at the back end as well, when he ran previously, he did that 7:49 clocking. And I have no doubt he's been working on that as well. So they'll be strong in all three disciplines. He has obviously, just like Marla, has gone to Kona on 4 occasions for Ironman World Championships. We saw him here for ITU Worlds. He got 7th in his age group. For Challenge Penticton, he was 2nd in his age group. But he knows what this is about, and he's got a great team with him. Casey Emerson's on his team, and her husband, Eric, I believe, is also going to be here, and they've worked with him before. So it's not only great that the athlete's been on the course before, but got a crew that knows what it's all about as well. Because we have had some crews before that have gotten lost out there or gotten their athlete lost, and that's a toughie when that happens, because you want everyone to stay in sync throughout the 3 days and come away with a big smile on their face. Even if things go a little awry, you still want them to cross that line and be grateful. And because, as the athletes say, some of them even prior to the start of the event think, oh, I've done this, I've done that, and maybe I don't really need a crew. But by the end of it, they realize the value of having a crew.
I think Brad was telling that exact same story in the last episode about how he thought the crew was not necessary before he had done his first race.
I think I called it an unnecessary evil.
And that's why you beautifully suffered.
Yes. Hey, I just rode my bike to Vancouver from Penticton without a crew. And that was brutal. That was painful. A crew could have just changed the day so much.
Yeah, Brad, that's kind of a crazy thing that you did, in that not only did you do it, but you did it on the hottest days of the heat wave. So just maybe give us a couple of minutes, like what were your distances here, and what was the heat like? And I think people have probably seen some of the photos on Facebook of your neck as a result. But for people that maybe aren't following you on Facebook yet, just give us a quick rundown of what that event was like for you.
I figured I was going to ride out to Vancouver. I made this decision on last Monday, and I knew that my friend was driving out here Thursday or Friday for an event they had in Kelowna. So I figured I would ride out Tuesday, Wednesday, and get a ride back with them. So I left Penticton Tuesday morning. It was 250 kilometers between here and Hope. It was extremely hot. I think it was 40 degrees by 10 a.m. in the morning. By the time I got to Princeton, which was around just over 100 kilometers from my home, it was well above 40, and there was headwinds, which were slowing me down even more. And I knew that the really challenging part of the ride was in between Princeton and Hope. It's a long distance between those two towns, and it's just mountains. There's 2 gas stations in between them, and they were about 75 kilometers away from each other. Well, 75 kilometers from Princeton, and then the next one was 75 kilometers. So there was distances in between it. And at no point did I ever run out of fluids or calories. I was really smart. I had a hydration vest, which I've never worn on a bike before, and it had 2.5 liters in it. And I carried, 1.5 liters in bottle cages on my bike, and I had a couple of bottles in the back of my jersey. I think every time I left a gas station, I had 6 liters of fluids on me. And the biggest gap I ever had was 75 kilometers. But with constant uphill, no shade, and a bit of a headwind, which wasn't providing any relief from the heat, mentally it was really tough. I talked to Steve after, and I told him for the first time in my life, I felt that my eyeballs were burning. I thought I was getting sunburn on my eyeballs, and that was worrisome. There was a point, at one point I had a breakdown. I ended up on the side of the highway, and I thought it was over. I thought I was going to have to call in my wife to come, scrape me off the road. And, it was really, looking back on it, it wasn't anything other than myself, and letting things sort of get to me. And, ultimately, I knew that I was on track. I knew that, I was still, everything that I was supposed to be doing, I was doing. There was no indicator that I had given myself that wasn't where it should be, So when I stepped back and I was objective and looked at and I removed my emotions, I realized it's not bad. Of course, this is unpleasant. I fully expected that. And so I chugged a bottle of Brisk, which tastes like cough medicine, iced tea. And then I ate a banana, and I just forced myself to finish that last climb up to the top of, I can't remember the name of the summit that you climb to when you leave Princeton, but it's long. It took me a couple hours of climbing to get to the top of it. And I just said, get to the top. You could start making the descent down the other side. And if you don't feel better by the time you start descending down the other side, then you can call it a day. There's nothing more you can do. But, by the time I got to the summit, everything changed around. I mean, I was feeling good, and I wasn't going to let anything affect me anymore. So when every semi-trailer went by and was tooting their horn and people were hanging out of minivans, hooting and hollering at me, I just simply smiled and waved. And I was thinking, they think I'm crazy, but what they don't know is the training that I've done for the last few years and my fitness level, and that I'm not crazy. I'm experienced, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm smart. And I might.
It doesn't mean you're not crazy.
Yeah, well, I might be a sucker for punishment, and I do love to suffer. But you can be out in extreme heats. You just have to be smart about how you do it. And I knew that, and I really wanted to prove to myself that I could execute it, and I pulled it off.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I've heard from a lot of athletes over the year doing the podcast is exactly the same story that you've just told, where they've been in these races and they really just need to take that time to pause and let them go back to their training and not give into that idea of, well, it's not my day today, because so many of the athletes have said that by just taking a few minutes to pause and reconsider, they were able to continue on and rely on the training that they've done, whether it was to beat what's going on with their body or to beat the elements. And that's something that for the athletes coming out, obviously half of our field is experienced this year, but for those that maybe aren't as experienced at definitely doing this distance and facing the elements they're going to face, I think that's a great story that you've told to help them to remember that there is that opportunity to pause and for the crew to step in and be there and make sure that they help out. Like that's so important. Steve, can you think of some other stories, because you're the guy with all the stories where people have overcome those sorts of things in the way Brad did, in making sure that they just relied on their training and relied on their crews and got through some tough times?
Yeah, there are many, many incidents of that. And I think what's important is to realize, you've put in the sweat equity, you've put in the time, you've put in the money. You're usually paying for your crew to be there, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the best thing a person can do when they're struggling is, if you know the crew well, is hand it over to them. If they know you well, ask them, what do you think I should do at this time? Because your own brain, sometimes it's not working too well. There's a part of you screaming to walk off. But what's important is to be able to sort of ask yourself, because sometimes it is a wise decision to leave and get out. It is, because you could do permanent damage. So you have to reflect. And I would say, you ask yourself, how are you going to feel about this when you're sitting at home a couple of days from now? Will it be if onlys or what ifs? Or will it be, I made the right decision because something was going very haywire? Because we've had some people end up in really nasty circumstances. And I'm not talking about crashes so much as sort of major other issues that have gone on here. Unfortunately, crashes do happen. And we've got a gentleman in the field, Scott McDermott, who can attest to that. But that's why it's great to be a comeback kid. So you've got to ask yourself about, the challenge and the depths, because we don't know how far we can dig until we've dug as far as we can. And therefore, this is the sort of thing that provides what, Brad describes there as I love to suffer. And it's how much discomfort can you take and continue to put one foot in front of the other, or have another pedal stroke, etc. And there are plenty of stories out there. But I think, one of the things you can do, there was a local some years ago who dedicated it to a charity. That can make a lot of difference. When you are dedicating a race to either an individual, for instance, or to a charity, yes, you could say it's a lot more pressure, but actually it allows you to go beyond, because you separate yourself sometimes from what your mind's saying. You're saying, no, we are dedicated to this. We're committed to this. And therefore, you've got a friendly companion with you. It's like this independent expert observer part of us that's like our inner coach. If we give it permission, it will tell us what we need to do. So sometimes, let's say you do have a coach. You can, if your coach is on your crew, you can ask, what do I need to do? But you're the world's leading expert on yourself. So if you can step aside for a moment and call upon that part of you that knows, it will tell you the right thing to do. And sometimes it's slogging it out. In Florida, there was a guy who made the cutoff by seconds, literally seconds. We had a crowd screaming and screaming. It was just wonderful. They still feature him on their Ultraman Florida website. It was such a wonderful occasion. And there's been others who have had their crew holding them up, you know, as they walk the final few meters just to stagger across. But literally within half an hour, they're beaming, absolutely beaming, because, you know, and that's the difference, right? Second here or second there. We literally had a guy called Jason Nixon at the World Championships on the Big Island, and he was a lifeguard in Hawaii as well. He literally made that finish line with 1 second to spare, and that was because the crew pushed him forward and he fell flat on his face and he across the line, literally. So I'm not suggesting any crews do that, but if you're that desperate when the clock is ticking down, you do what you got to do. And so you can imagine how he felt. But literally, I mean, his legs were so bruised from what he had gone through. It took months for him to recover, but he never regretted putting himself through the agonies he did to get to that line. And I hope it's not agony for anyone out there in the coming couple of weeks. But I think it's such a worthwhile thing, and you're honoring yourself. You're the ones who paid your money. You're the ones who have put in the work. And now it's about letting it come out and flow through you rather than forcing it. It will be there if you give it permission, and a little bit of delayed gratification. We know that when it comes to ultras.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's one of the things with the podcast that I've really wanted to get out there, are just some of those tips of how to get through these races for the people that are less experienced. And I think that was the thing that came up more often than not with most of the interviews, was people just saying that, you know, you can get through those tough times and get yourself to the finish line if you allow yourself to do it properly. And hopefully people will, you know, take that in if they're listening to the podcast and take in these stories and have that same realization. Right. A lot of people have their own personal mottos. You may remember, you know, pain is temporary, pride is forever, that sort of thing. And I know with Scott, he's got the warrior code, for instance, and maybe we'll read that out before the start of the event. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, guys, I want to thank you for joining me on the last episode of season 1, because after this, we're going into the race, and hopefully I'll get some great little tidbits during the race to bring out in the post-race recap show. But thanks, guys, for being here on the last episode, and for obviously supporting this endeavor to get more information out to the Ultraman community. Steve, you've been fantastic. Everybody's loving the Steve King stories that are in each of the episodes. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, there's still like 10 more in the bank all ready to go. And there is one in this episode as well. It'll be coming up in just a few minutes. And Brad, thank you as well for helping me with just the chance to come in and put the podcast together in a way that will hopefully help all Ultraman competitors, but also our race. So I thank you for your support in that as well. Thanks,
Larry. You're doing a great job of this. I have to say, you're very impressive what you're doing here, and thank you for doing it. And I will say that I miss the two of you guys. We do all talk quite often, but I haven't seen you guys in so long. So I really look forward to next week and to seeing your faces.
Likewise. Take good care. Try to keep fit.
Same to you. See you, Larry.
All right. Thanks, guys. And so ends season 1 of the podcast. Thanks for coming along for the ride. In a couple of weeks, I will be back for episode 1 of season 2. I've already lined up some amazing Ohana member guests for season 2, and I will be introducing you to the athletes who will be competing at Ultraman Canada 2022, which, by the way, is already sold out. Waitlist spots are now being accepted, though. And 2023 is half sold out at this point as well. Since this is the final episode of the season, I have a special bonus Steve King story for those of you who have listened all the way to the end today. Enjoy.
And now, here's another Steve King story.
The next athlete I'm going to talk about is a lady who lives up in Kamloops, but also has a home in Ironman and Ultraman City here in Penticton. She's a lady who's raced throughout the Okanagan. We've seen her not only in Penticton, of course, but we've seen her in Osoyoos, in Oliver. She's taken on challenges like our bare bones duathlon. She's won her age division there. She's done the Grand Fondo, the Axel Merckx Grand Fondo. She's been first overall and second overall there in her divisions, as well as taking great positions in the Great White North, the Desert Half, the Oliver Half Ironman, which is actually won her age division in, but was second female overall. And when it comes to also the Peach Classic here in Penticton, not only in 2012 was she the Masters champion, but she was the first female overall as well. 2001, she did Ironman Canada here in Penticton in 10 hours, 37 minutes. She's raced at the Xterra Worlds, but I think the biggest thing that potentially happened, apart from one other thing I'm going to mention after this, was the fact that in Whistler in 2018, she was the first athlete in her age division across the finish line. That was in the 50 to 54 division. But about 30 minutes after winning that and being so ecstatic and making it to the Worlds, of course, she got disqualified because her son was so excited. He leapt over the fence and ran down through the finish line with her, which is something that you have been able to do before, but they had made a new rule. And so suddenly she got DQ'd. However, the World Championships decided she was a very worthy champion and should be there at the Worlds. So they invited her to Kona for the 2018 Championships. And she came away with a 10:26:04 clocking, second overall in that the World Championships in the 50 to 54 division, second out of 121 athletes, the best in the world. The only person better than her that day was Michelle Enslin from South Africa. This lady is also a great cross-country skier, by the way, but it was in 2014 when she was in Penticton and took on the challenge of the Ultraman Canada race, a toughie. But she was not only the first female, but was third place overall, recording an overall time of 25 hours, 24 minutes, 32 seconds. But en route, she beat what was and set at that time what was records for day 1 and day 2 in terms of the bike course portions of the event. But it came down to a dramatic finish because the US's Amy Van Tassel was also with us, and she set what was a run record for the women at that time of 7:58:51. And as I've mentioned previously on other slots, I have mentioned that she went on to win an Ultraman distance in Israel, being top overall there amongst the men and the women. But the run brought it to a lot closer finish than we anticipated. I mentioned this lady's time of 25:24:32. Amy Van Tassel's time was 25:32:29. So just 7 minutes, 57 seconds separated them at the finish line. It made for a very exciting finish. This lady also works in the hospitals, the Royal Inland Hospital in Kamloops, and she was there when a dear friend and pro triathlete by the name of Janelle Morrison was brought in after a horrendous car crash. So she was there to support a friend and fellow triathlete. And in fact, the star of a documentary, a movie about that accident and what it did for Janelle Morrison. It's called A Second Chance. I would urge you to watch that, as we love to watch our athletes take on challenges at the Ultraman distance. And as I mentioned, she lives in Kamloops with her husband, a former top triathlete himself. That's Greg Timewell and her son, AJ. And we're just thrilled that she does so well. And we're looking forward to seeing her back at another start line. The athlete I'm referring to, Yvonne Timewell. A very appropriate name.
Thank you, Steve. Since this is the final episode of the season, I just want to throw out a few thank yous to the people who make this all possible. Production today is by 55 Enterprises and me, Larry Ryan. Senior production is by Larry Ryan. Interview segments written by Larry Ryan. Research was by Larry Ryan. Senior editing by Larry Ryan. Digital content created by Larry Ryan. And a special thanks to Mary Jo Dionne and Steve King for their contributions as well.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultraman podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises brought to you by Ultraman Canada. Now really, go subscribe now before you forget.